Cedac for our meeting in March. Couple of housekeeping things I wanted to just go over. Every meeting that is taking place in the French conference room from now on is being live streamed, and that's kind of the expectation now from the select board. So that's just want to let you know that.
How long are they on the YouTube?
I believe they're on forever.
I was just curious. I just didn't see the last CDAC.
The last CDAC had problems, and I don't know what that was, but that was one of the first meetings that we had done, and that might have gotten fixed.
Yes, because you can have operating equipment probably.
Yeah.
Just curious.
So, yeah.
Sat over here, the room felt very
Thank you. And that's really what I wanted to touch base with everyone about, was that these meetings are live streamed.
So tell me
Go ahead.
two things, live stream as in visual and audio and visual.
Correct.
And
On YouTube.
is it just on YouTube and not our
We used to do,
Comcast, Spectrum?
no, it's still on that, but now it's on YouTube live
Okay.
stream. We don't participate with main, was it Town Halls, I think was the other one that was on. With Town Hall stream, we're no longer on that one.
Okay, but the other night I watched part of a select board meeting on my Spectrum, whatever channel. Is this on that same channel? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yes.
Okay, so it's on it, okay, live, live still,
I would assume so.
okay.
13 something.
13,
Yes.
yeah, whatever.
It's up there.
I had to hunt it.
150 or
Yeah,
something
something
channel.
like that.
Something. So I just wondered if that's everything, but the YouTube is, we have a YouTube channel now?
We do.
That
Town
we
of
got enough
Camden.
subscribers to?
Correct. I believe we have enough subscribers. If you have not yet, please do.
I think we do.
And how do you find that? I mean, where?
You can just Google.
Yeah, prior to coming to this meeting, I just typed in Camden
YouTube?
CDAC on YouTube, and the
On
budget
YouTube?
committee came up, and I saw you there.
Uh-oh, okay.
Yeah, so you can just Google Town of Camden, Maine on YouTube, or go into YouTube.
Yep.
Town of Camden, Maine, and it comes up there, and then you can subscribe to it.
Okay.
That doesn't allow two-way, like Rockport has two-way when they're projecting one of their meetings, people are also writing in and commenting from home. But I don't think we have that.
Oh, no, I don't believe so. I mean, I'm not that tech person, but no, we're not sitting here waiting for someone to send us a question.
That we can address.
That's not what we're doing.
Well, that would be great.
Audra just needs to give us her cell phone, and we can do that.
Yeah.
Right on screaming line.
Right.
Audra's cell phone number.
She'd be thrilled.
All right, and that's really what I wanted to touch base about. And Ellis, thank you for coming today. Greatly appreciate it. And Jeff Senders called and said he unfortunately couldn't be here today. He had was working on Camp Kiev, I guess, on a project over there. But
Handouts?
yes, that's it for right this moment. Jeff Senders is going to be working with me, and maybe I'll just jump down to. I'll get back to it. That was town-owned land assessment. And I guess we can jump right into the summary of the select board meeting the other night. That went fine, and just so everyone knows, there was, the select board's very interested these days in what committees are doing and making sure committees are staying on task on what the work plan that the select board has approved of them. And they want to kind of follow up on what the Cedac has been doing. Especially in light that Cedac is reviewing the RFP that I put together on this for the tannery site. And then they're interested also in Sagamore Farm as well. We did I guess Lehman did a just kind of brief summary of where we've been and what we've been doing.
This was the same night that Ransom was there giving an update on the tannery project, not just RFP, but just where we're headed with it. And so he and Jeremy covered most of the tannery stuff. And I talked a little bit about the other things that we're trying to do, CDAC, being the assessment just of town-owned property, also the Sagamore Farms, also housing, that's something that we're taking a look at as well. And I think that was about it. Broadband, we just said, we're still, that's on our plate, and we're trying to assess where to go with that. And I got the sense, first of all, they seem very supportive of what we're doing, and, you're heading in the right direction, continue on. And I get the sense they'd like for us to update them on occasion, not every meeting or maybe every month, but as time goes on, occasionally come in and let them know kind of where we are, as opposed to just bringing them something. If we come up with something we want to recommend, like the tannery RFP, you don't just get on the agenda and present it, kind of let them know the things we're working on. So, and I guess that's.
Did they have any specific questions for us about?
No,
they're
I
asking?
did mention, I guess I did mention just in passing almost with housing that, there were a lot of issues going on in the housing in Camden, and a lot of challenges toward addressing affordably priced housing. And something came up about the short-term rental, and other than just, that's something we want to address. I didn't bring it up, they did. And so that was one thing I had a note on, is that they addressed that, but not, not in detail. And that was the only feedback we got. And I think they did like the idea that we had housing on our list of things to address.
Did we talk about setting up a subcommittee?
Not
Did you
for
mention-
housing,
Yeah.
not to.
Haven't yet.
We haven't done that. Or, at our last meeting, we also talked about, and I didn't bring those notes, but we talked about, there was a group, was there a group that was at one time in the distant past looking at Sagamore Farms? Is that?
No, I don't think anyone really looked at that. I think there's Cahill, right, was looking at affordable housing in town.
Okay. So
That was the
there
only
a
entity that
housing
was
group,
really
not,
looking at it.
that's why I left my notes.
Then it was a hiking paths and trails were up there too.
Yep, right. And we did address, at least, that's currently what's there, the hiking paths, the trails, the solar installation, and, the discussion is what else fits, what
Right.
should we look at? And that was kind of the presentation.
Maybe since we're just touching on Sagamore really quick, I had 5 or 10 minutes on the Sagamore Farm update later on maybe I can just do that right now since we're there. The Energy Committee has been looking at doing an expanded solar farm up at Sagamore Farm. I think the Select Board's a little concerned about that. And is that the appropriate location for an expanded solar farm? Especially in light of, I looked at, we have about 700, if my math's correct, about 700 acres of town-owned property. And, we want to make sure that we're using our land that we do have in the most appropriate way. And, if there's marginal land, that's where solar ought to go, is marginal lands that not developable. So I think before we do anything else up at Sagamore, we're going to be doing a better assessment of what our options are up there. And the Select Board has directed me to put together an RFP on access to Sagamore Farm and what it would take to do certain types of developments at Sagamore Farm, complying with DOT regulations on entrances and, exiting onto Route 1.
Is that access just road access, or are you talking infrastructure like water and sewer and other things?
Primarily
That's what
just
we look
road,
at,
primarily
just
just
road.
road access, like how we can, what Sagamore Farm Road currently could sustain and what kind of increased traffic, if any, that could handle. Right now, the only access we have to Sagamore Farm is via an easement up Chip Late's property, and that is strictly for installation and maintenance of the solar farm. And then we have Sagamore Farm Road. Our property does come down right to Route 1, where Sagamore Farm Road is. And that's really the extent of the access that we have there. So it's critical to look at it when we're looking at 77 acres up there, whether it be for housing or whatever else. As you all know, you've been here in Camden a long time. Camden has lots of committees, lots of groups that look at properties over and over and over again. And this one's been looked at. I went back and looked at the history for Sagamore Farm, and it's been looked at a lot, and nothing ever happens. Granted, Roger mentioned the trails up there. I think the trails can certainly add a ton of value to a development that could happen up there, especially if it's a residential development. I mean, I think trails abutting Camden Hill State Park's pretty awesome asset that we have, especially the views that can be up there as well. So I am looking at that. I'm working with Bill Kelly now on the legal end of access, and then we'll be doing an RFP to get some consultants just to give us an idea on access and what it would take to do some development up there. I mean, that's critical before we get anyone gets, knickers in a knot and all get worked up about what's happening up on that property. We need to know how we can access it and what kind of, what kind of traffic we can bring in and out of that property safely and in compliance with state rules. So that's where we are with Sagamore. I guess I can run right, since we did the summary, I think that's good. And then we can touch base on the committee or a subcommittee, subgroup. I think it's important. And we ought to maybe try to do the same thing for internet fiber. So we can, maybe that can be our final thing, is just at least kind of use this other group. But I will tell you, I don't think the select board has an appetite for creating more committees right now.
No, they don't.
So I think if we can try to do some of this within our group, I think that's the best avenue moving forward. So we can touch the Tannery RFP. I think that everyone has a copy. And there's one for Mark. I met with, I got one right here. Thank you. Yeah. I met with Roger and Steve and Jeff Senders a couple of weeks ago now. We had a good conversation about this RFP, and really we were, I think, looking at how we were going to rate or rank RFPs that did eventually come in. And so Roger put together some good information on ways that he thought we would do this. I really appreciate what Roger put together. I did incorporate some of it, albeit tweaked a fair amount. I did talk to the select board about the RFP process when Ransom was here and when we reported to the select board, when Lehman and I did. And I got the feeling that night that the select board wants this to be as open of an RFP as possible, so that we don't limit ourselves on what our options are for the property, understanding that the Tannery Work Group did a lot of work, and before that it was the redevelopment work group, Apollo Tannery Site Redevelopment Work Group, and they did a ton of work on this, and not throwing that out at all. That's not the idea, but the idea is at least to put an RFP out there that includes the work that they did, but also looks at and asks a developer to propose something, give us something. You never know what we may get, and I think the select board wants us to be as open as possible. And if you read in here, I even said that the town will be willing to entertain zone changes. Residential is not an allowed use unless it's mixed commercial and residential. So I did include there that, if residential is an idea a developer has, we would certainly entertain that. I mean, we have to take it to town vote anyway, and whatever happens. So I think getting as many options to us as possible is the best scenario for us.
My understanding was environmentally, you couldn't do residential on the first floor.
So the RAGs, which are the state standards for the residual action guidelines, I believe is what it stands for. Those have changed, and I'm not the environmental guy. So, But as I understand, those standards have changed, and it is possible, would be possible to do residential on that site. And you can do things, you know, in essence, it's a cap, right? And so you'd have a cap site, and then you'd have a vapor recovery, much like in Bangor, we did a project at the Shaws. That was an old coal, manufactured gas plant there, and it's venting out through the light poles in the parking lot, but everything's capped, everything's sealed. I do think it's doable, but I would leave that really to the environmental consultants. I mean, it's possible to actually move contaminated material from one spot on the site to another spot on the site and also get a portion of the site completely clean too. You know, I mean, that's doable. Now, those are options, and I think that's important in this, and I think that's what this does. And I'm sorry you just got this and you're just reading it now, but what I did was I went through, kind of gave a background and kind of some site details on the property, a little bit of history on the original cleanup, when they capped the most contaminated area or put the slurry wall in on the most contaminated site area. Then we had the environmental assessments done that were done looking at everything else, as well as was that slurry wall effective, and is the slurry wall functioning and operating like it was supposed to, and it all came back as it was. So now we're moving forward, and just so people, I think most of you know, and Ellis, you weren't here, but so the cleanup was moving along, and we were going to try to do the cleanup this summer, and the farmer's market was going to move, and they were going to go to the old mill parking lot. We decided to put brakes on this for now in the cleanup so that we can put this RFP out, and then we can hopefully work with the developer and the consultant who's doing our cap for us so that they can work together so that parking lot can go in the right location. And, you know, when you're looking at putting a cap on a site, you don't want to do this multiple times. You want to do this once and be done. So that's the idea, is to get a developer in play with us, to work with us over, as I see this is going out in the next month, and you know, we have to take something to town vote, so that would be November. So I could envision, you know, this summer, our consultant, us bringing to the public, you know, the proposals, and hopefully get buy-in on one or two or multiple from the community, and then have them work with a we may have to do an initial, I don't know how it's all going to work out, but maybe an initial meeting, special town meeting or something, to get a formal, yes, we like this proposal, and then they can start working with the consultant on the cleanup plan. Were you going to ask something?
Did I hear that there was a bond on that property for the cleanup? And is that still outstanding?
Yes.
And so if we sell this, is it the intent, does that get paid off, or is that's not the way municipal governments work? I mean, if we were privately owned and we sold it, we'd probably want, I was just wondering the extent of, is it 100,000 or $1 million?
I forget. I don't remember off the top of my head. It is in the budget. It's like 60,000 a year.
See, I think it's 60,000.
It's about 60,000 a year.
That was what Pat was always pushing for, was to
Yeah.
sell the property so that
Yeah.
we could get rid of that.
Get rid of
And
it.
it
I
goes
agree.
for several more years, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. And I don't remember.
That's okay.
Whether, how you handle that.
I just was curious as to how much.
Yes. No, that is a darn good question, and I got to get to that one, so I haven't gotten there yet. But
Pretty sure it's 60.
it is 60,000 a year. I know. I just don't remember when it ends.
Yeah. I mean, so that's a savings, plus we put it back on the tax bills. There'd be tax.
I mean, I think that's the hope.
That's
That's all I
Right?
know.
Yeah.
All right.
And I did go into, I think, great detail without going into too much about the Apollo Tannery Site Redevelopment Work Group and then the Tannery Work Group. I am going to include copies of this, and you can all have it, just so you know what it is. And this was the with edits, what was approved at town meeting on June 10th, 2018, or 2008. And I think that's important to know that, because that's what goes to town meeting every year. And the guidelines, or what do they call them, guiding principles.
You got another idea?
Yeah. And Steve, you've probably seen these Do you want?
Original one?
Yeah.
Are you also including the report of the more recent tannery group?
Yes. That's what I did say that. I didn't fully explain all that, but yes, we are. They're kind of very different. They're just I don't think they get at the same thing, and that's why, at least I'm glad from my perspective that the way that they have done this since 2008, they've carried these still along.
Decade difference.
What's that?
It's a decade difference.
There's a decade difference, for sure. So the developer would get copies of these, it would go out in part of the package. And I have a copy of the work group. You guys have seen
already-
that more recently, though. I've shared that with you. And this isn't the full report. This doesn't have the site plan.
That's just a presentation in
Yeah.
PowerPoint.
So, and then what else did I did say, Steve, for your benefit and others out there, second paragraph of the development proposal piece, the whole first paragraph of it talks about the tannery work group and the tannery redevelopment work group and their guidelines and their recommendations. The second sentence does say, however, it is desired that a developer will implement as many of the recommendations of the tannery work group as possible. So that is in there. And then I go into a little bit about the zoning piece. We are a business river district, and what those uses are. And then I also mentioned that this property does benefit from the business opportunity zone, which was done a couple of years ago before I got here. Planning board had come up with a proposal called the BOZ, and it tries to balance some of this stuff, gives some people a little more opportunity, and at the same time trying to preserve some green space as well. So I did include that. A developer would get those.
Can I ask a zoning question on that? I realize you said we might rezone, we could potentially rezone the property. There's 2.8 acres there, so it's under 3 acres. I'm
Yeah.
in a residential river zone, and you can only have one residence per acre. Would that?
You're in what zone? On Mechanic? You're in Village District, aren't you?
Whatever I am, it's on the river, and we
Yeah.
can't put an apartment on because we're half an acre.
Yeah.
Does that carry through? Is that a function of the river, or is?
No, that's a function of the village. You're in the Village District, I'm pretty certain, which is not this.
There was some kind of a restriction because of the river.
Oh, sure. In the Village District,
Across the street, they could have.
yes, in the Village District, shoreline zoning has other standards that are additional to our standards when it comes to minimum lot size and number of dwelling units and the
So
like.
that's my question on this.
That would not apply to this because this is, it depends what zone we would go into. That said, because it does have an industrial past, the way that DEP looks at shoreline zoning. So the standards in the Business River District or in, the transitional business or the harbor district are very different in terms of setbacks and lot coverages and all that stuff compared to more undeveloped zones like the village zone. It's just the area hasn't been developed over time. These coming through here, if you can imagine trying to, a lot like where Bagel Cafe is, it's immediately adjacent to the McGuntacook River, and if you tried to build that today under today's village district standards, you wouldn't be able to do anything there. So the DEP does have, and that's why standards in industrial built up or heavy commercial areas are much different in shoreline zoning than they are in the village district. So out there, and that's why the BR has a much less setback from the stream or the river as opposed to village. So it may be that it would have to go to, we may have to add uses to the BR, like through contract zoning or something like that, and be somewhat creative, but we couldn't go to a village district because of that reason. What else? And then there's what someone would need to include in their request for proposals, and this is just a draft, and this was intended to kind of maybe get you guys thinking if you wanted something else in here, and you don't have to give me these comments today. You can take this home and mull it over and share your thoughts with me as well. And then there was a piece on how we would evaluate the proposals based on some criteria. I don't really know on the percentage on how Roger and Steve and Jeff and I had talked about percentages, how to weigh them. Right now, I think I'm going to keep it a little bit open until I have a conversation with the select board. So ultimately, what we put together, we're going to take to the select board, or I'll take to the select board, and then the select board will kind of say, yay, looks good, or they'll make their comments and they would like something changed in it, and then it would go out. So I was kind of leaving that percentage on what weight
Can I
is
just
given
ask a
things.
question when we get to that?
Yeah.
If we're lucky enough and we get a bid for the full appraised value and we get something for significantly less,
Mhm.
does the value to the taxpayer, that sale, weigh a lot heavier? Or is that where we're going with this?
Well, I think it's all inclusive, so.
And then that goes to the select board, or does that get voted on, the two options? Or, I was just curious how the town government works, and I'm sorry for
Yeah.
being naive on this,
Yeah.
but as a private person, I would take the highest bid.
Sure. I understand where that's coming from, where you're coming from there. I mean, keep in mind, every year, and I don't have last year's with me, but I have from the 2008, at town meeting, if we're going to sell it, you got to take it to town vote to sell it, and you've got to do it consistent with the guiding principles from the June 10th, 2008 meeting. Now, is there a way at that town meeting? I mean, if you look at this, I mean, the guiding principles are sell the whole property. That's in the guiding principles. There's a lot of people that don't want to sell it. Well, I'm not going to say a lot of people. There are some people that don't want to sell the property. The guiding principles say sell the property. So if someone comes in with a lease and say, hey, we just want to lease it, I got to think the town can, at town meeting, figure out a way to get through that process, would be my hope.
So let me apply for someone who didn't want to buy the whole parcel, but wanted to leave something that's there now.
And that's what I'm trying to do, is leave everything wide open and have all our options on the table, realizing that we are limited a little bit by these past actions of past town meetings. And, I mean, people rightfully did that, right? But it may not be
Feel
the.
compelled
Right,
to buy the whole thing.
right.
I have a question. Actually, I want to ask Roger, because you were on both committees, correct? You're in the Tannery Work Group and the one before it. And I was on the board at the end of the Tannery Work Group thing. And at the time that I remember it, there was a strong community feel for the people that were there about sort of splitting the property up in thirds. And there was, the farmer's market is a permanent home for the farmer's market, a playground was mentioned, which is not in here, and then the development, which is important. Can you refresh me on your memory of where we left off and the way the town felt about it at the time? Because you were involved in both things.
Well, I mean, they were very different times.
Right.
I mean, in 2008, we were really kind of pressing on economic growth, and then that all crashed. And so when we prepared the report, we were thinking, jobs, commercial development, and so on. But then, of course, the straw vote took place, and that showed a very different complexion in terms of voter preference. And so the Tannery Work Group was really developed this grand compromise between development of pure sort and community use. So I think the developers just need to be aware that we have this kind of schizophrenia around what we want to see. You could say from the 2008, we want all 100% development, but if it's modified by the more recent report, which is, more carefully done in the community spirit. So I think we need to leave room for the energy and the creativeness proposals that we receive from developers, but they need to go into this being aware of the background and history, and the more recent history, to me, is more reflective of where we are now as a community.
Yeah, that was my memory. I'm just concerned about if we work really hard and get a proposal to sell the whole property and stuff, and we have to go to a town vote for that it could sort of blow up in our face, because I'm just sort of concerned about where the town was the last time we talked about this and where we're headed. So It just,
How many people were on
I get
both
that.
work groups besides you?
This Tannery Work Group was probably 15 anyway.
No, how many people were on both besides you?
Oh.
You were in both of those
Were you on
groups.
both, Steve?
I'm not old enough. to-
Steve wasn't.
Oh, wrong place.
Wasn't,
I don't remember.
what's her name?
All right, here's the list. Much smaller list. Lonnie Temple, Rosemary Weymouth, Roger Moody, Carla Ferguson, Wendell Ann
Goodness.
Lunis, Skip Bates, Martin Cates, and Anita Brocha Scott.
Anita, was she on both?
I think
Yeah.
She was.
it was,
That's the only one.
Not Kathy. Who's the other-
Jamie Weymouth was on the working group, Tannery Work Group, Rosemary on the
Was
original
Carla-
one.
Was Carla on both?
Carla? No,
Takes some time around.
no.
I just, it was, I cheated, now I see that the town's invested almost $1 million in this property, and that's why I'm just coming to the fact that, there's significant dollars that the town has put into that should be recovered at some point, potential, that should be a consideration, I think.
I mean, I hear that. I will say, just reading back, since I've been here, I've read a lot of history on how we got here, and I put it in there in the first paragraph, under history, when we foreclosed on it. The community's decision at the time to acquire the site was based on the potential that citizens saw for the property to be used in a way that could attract good paying year-round jobs and be an asset for the community and the neighborhood. I mean, that was in 2003.
That's also what the vote was. And then out of that vote, because the vote was close, we got the second group. So I think that that's reflective of a group that worked on it. I'm not sure that it's reflective of the entire town, and that's what we'll find out if the whole thing goes to a vote.
I think since then too, it was a 3-acre piece, right? And then we pulled out whatever it is, the half acre of the Riverwalk, and now, if you look at, compared to the original work group, sell the whole thing, well, it's not the whole thing anymore. We do have this Riverwalk that is green space, town, forever, green space. That's there. So, and in here, I did talk about trying to integrate the Riverwalk into the development and other green space. I didn't want to, again, be too focused. I wanted to try to keep this as
I
broad
understand.
as possible.
I was just sort of curious because I remember that I wasn't here for the 2008 work, but I remember the Tannery Work Group stuff. There were substantial amounts of people working on that project for a lot of meetings. They were very well attended. Filled up the cafeteria at the middle school. And I know that at the town meetings, it always comes up, and there's some very, I don't know about the depth of the support, but I know that there are some very strong voices about how we develop it. So I'm just trying to get it. I thought I might ask Roger because he was there for all of it and a primary person for all of it. So I was just sort of curious on his perspective.
Yeah.
I've got a question about the timing for this. If we get a proposal and it goes to town selling any of the property goes to town meeting, is that what's the timing of that? Can we call a town meeting, or is that the regularly scheduled town meeting?
I think based on the discussions with the select board and the RFP the other night, that it would have to be at a November town meeting, really. That said, I mean, we've got until 2021, September of 2021, to finalize the cleanup and have a certificate of completion from the state and the feds on the cap. So, that's where things need to be done on that site. And we can't sell the property until the cleanup is done, until there's a certificate of completion done. So this developer is going to have to be with us, this whole time until that site's done.
One clarification, I was talking to somebody that wasn't sure. My understanding is that as part of getting the new grant, we have to include development. Is that correct?
Brownfield grants are intended to redevelop.
Okay, that was my understanding. That I think Audra told me that
Brownfields.
we have to have some sort of.
I mean, I think the definition of develop is, I think you'll find that there are some cleanup, some brownfield cleanups that are more developed than others.
Right.
Right.
It's a nature of, but what we're doing is important to having gotten the grant. Because if I remember correctly, when we went out to try and get this grant, they cut back the number of grants EPA does, and there were only 38 given for the entire country.
True.
And we're one of the 38, and part of that is because of, we planned on some sort of development.
Yes.
So we're in that, it's a really tough road to hoe, but we need to find a way to.
And I think
make
too,
it work.
part of it is that the Camden is a pretty engaged community too, and I think that was another piece on why we got it as opposed to some other places didn't. I do.
Okay.
They're not specifying what kind of development,
Correct.
right? It
Correct.
doesn't have to be commercial or residential or parks or whatever. So it's just as long as it's being developed into something. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to get all the information out there so
Yeah.
everybody's aware of
Yep.
everything that's being thought about. Okay.
Steve, do you mind coming over by a mic just so we get you?
I understand that this is a draft.
Uh-huh.
And looking at it very briefly, my concerns about it is that I think it doesn't propose adequate protections for the farmers market. I believe that it just says farmers market once, but I believe that even though we're trying to cast theoretically a wide net for all types of potential development, we are also in a position of control.
We are.
By how we put out an RFP, we can control what's going to happen in that property. And I think part of that control should be stipulating where the farmer's market is going to be, maybe even things such as, since the last group envisioned whatever commercial development there might be in the middle, that any parking facility might be between that and the farmer's market with the potential of it being shared on Saturdays, when theoretically the commercial use wouldn't be very intense. The other thing that I think we can incorporate as a control element is think about and dictate the amount of green space that we're going to command a developer to leave. And I think a more controlled RFP, a more specific RFP, is a favor to the developer. I mean, it really tells him the window that he has to operate in so that he's going to come back with a proposal that hopefully meets the needs of and desires of the mass number of the community. Because for one thing, the way you stipulate the dating is if we don't get a proposal that enough people like in time to do November, then we're talking a year from November or the following June. So it starts backing up towards our grant deadline.
It does for sure. And I mean, I think the town needs to be cognizant of that. You know, I mean, like.
One reason we should be looking for.
Well, I mean, I hear exactly what you're saying.
And I just have one more point.
Yeah.
I know that an emphasis for a certain number of people is tax revenue. We pay a lot of money into that, et cetera. We're never going to get that $1 million back, not on the limited amount of land that's available for development. If we do get it back, it will be over a long run of real estate taxes. One of the things that's mentioned that I'd like to just address is housing. Okay, for one thing, housing doesn't provide any long-term jobs. It's very short-term jobs for people who are probably already here and working. The disadvantage of housing, as a former housing developer, is it's more of a tax drain than it is a tax contribution, because if you build modest price housing as opposed to luxury Bayview Street housing, chances are the number of students that are going to be in that amount of housing, the tax revenue of those houses isn't going to cover the cost of educating those children. I say that just as it's a fact. I myself do not want to discourage young families, with children from moving here.
I get that. I do. I understand.
So I think,
Housing
as you
piece.
go over this, that more specific makes you more powerful. and us more powerful and more likely to get a vote passed. Thank you.
Yeah. I will look at the farmer's market piece, and maybe if the group can share some thoughts too on this stuff as well, after the meeting or now if you can. But I will look at that. I do appreciate it, and the farmer's market piece, it is an asset. The one thing I will say I struggle with a little bit is that when I look at the town property that we have, is that we have about 700 acres. About 500 is green space in town, like park, green space, recreational space, 500 of that 700. And then you look at what else do we have? We have Sagamore Farm, and I'm saying what else do we have, and I'm thinking from like a commercial development, any development potential here in Camden. We are not creating more land. Our commercial areas are very limited. So when we talk about we want to bring in jobs, we want to create jobs, we want to grow this economy outside of, and I know we can grow the economy, through people working from home and the kind of the new economy. Again, people working from home with fiber and all that, we can do that. But when we don't have much land, that's commercial. We got a ton of residentially zoned property. No one's selling it. Everyone's holding on to it. I mean, it's wonderful. It makes the town very pastoral and it's aesthetically beautiful. There's a sense of place here that's amazing like no other around. That said, we have 700 acres of town-owned land, 500's green space, conserved park land, and then we have the state park, and then we have 77 acres of the tannery, of Sagamore Farm. And then we have almost 3 acres of this property. This is the one property that is zoned commercial. And then, I'm just trying to, what else do we have? Yeah, we got 67 acres of cemetery, and then 30 acres of town facilities. And that's like the town office, opera house, public works, wastewater, pump stations, police and fire, our parking lots. That gives us 108 acres left. And that's 77 of Sagamore and 3 acres of the tannery just under. So that's 80 acres. That gives us 28 acres left that the town has to look at for opportunities. That's not a lot. And, most of that is undevelopable as it is. I mean, I've looked at some of it. Jeff Senders, and I'm kind of getting into another agenda item, but Jeff Senders and I are going to look at, he's going to do that kind of pro bono with me. Look at some other town land that we have. And I don't see much opportunity other than solar potentially on some of this, if the town wants to go down solar. And that's why I'm so hesitant about expanded solar at Sagamore, is because when you look at these, you want to use marginal land, I mentioned it earlier, for solar. You don't want to take your highest and best, nicest land and put it to use in a way that, you can't get something from it. And I'm not coming from this as a pro-developer. I'm coming to this as, economic development, community development, planning perspective. It's all of the above. All of this plays into it. And, I mean, again, we have a sense of place here, I believe, like no other on the mid-coast of Maine. And I value it. I know all the people that live here value it. So it's just kind of a struggle in trying to make all these things work. As evidenced by multiple work groups that looked at the tannery, as evidenced by multiple groups that looked at Sagamore Farm, and nothing happens. So, we can continue down this road. It would be unfortunate if we do, in my opinion. So at least, and I appreciate what Steve's saying. And I value the farmer's market. The farmer's market is used 6 hours a week. And I think we just need to remember that. And again, it's a valuable 6 hours. It's very valuable, and people love it, and that's a great thing. We also want to make sure we find the best location for it. I'm not sure it's the town's responsibility to find locations for farmers markets, but that's what we're doing. I know when the Belfast Farmers Market was expanding, or when they wanted to go to a new location, they went and looked for properties.
Well, I have a question about the
Yes.
farmer's market too, that, what if they decide they don't want to be there anymore and they have another place they want to go to? So then there's that space that we have allocated to
Sure.
them.
I mean, I think right now they're really committed to the space. I mean, I think it works very well.
Where are they going this summer? I haven't.
This summer, and I know you've been away, so this summer they're staying at the tannery site.
Oh, okay.
They're going to be there.
I thought the
Yes.
town gave them some options.
So the cleanup was going to move forward this summer because this RFP wasn't going out, and so they're actually staying there for this summer. We did ask them, we gave them options, we gave them, and there'll be the same options next year. The mill parking lot, we actually talked to them about the landing on Saturdays. We talked about Atlantic Avenue, gave them an option on Atlantic Avenue, like when we close that down. Those could be an amazing thing, I think, but they were not keen on those two sites. And we also talked about the Snowball. We talked about the Snowball being a four-season place. Are there things we can do to encourage more people to go there? And we talked to them about that. But right now, they're liking the tannery.
Also, with the parking lot up here,
Yes.
where they,
Where they were before, yeah.
I mean, right now, they really love the tannery, and I mean, I get it. That's where they're comfortable with, and they've got a good following there, and I get it. But I'm just trying to keep it all in, trying to work through some of this, and it's not an easy, trying to meet everyone's desires and make everyone happy is very hard. And,
I think that's what getting back to it is, recognizing the farmer's market's great, but making it in the rankings, but not limiting it so we don't discourage anybody from making an offer on the property. It's been sitting there vacant for so long.
it has.
That's the thing. It shouldn't be, it has to, one way or another. It should be up to the developer to come in with a proposal and we'll
I think
assess it.
I agree, and I will, for Steve's, I will focus, I think, a little more, add that some to it on the farmer's market. I mean, I have met with a developer who knows about the farmer's market, and he's interested, I don't know if he's going to submit, but he's interested in doing something that could accommodate the farmer's market. He's also said, I do playgrounds too, so they may do playground.
I have,
Could I just add one thing?
Yep.
Quickly, that, in your summation about land, et cetera, you were just talking about town-owned land.
Correct.
There's certainly other land available for commercial development to some extent, but there's also, we have to admit, the guy who owned the mill tried to make that into a commercial project, and it failed. There's been lots of empty commercial space all up and down Route 1. I mean, we also just have to deal with what the market situation is.
Yeah, I sometimes think about the schools too. I mean, with the new middle school being set back, parking available there, is there a community component that's possible among schools? Do they see that as some kind of risk and not to be touched? I don't know. It seems to me maybe a conversation to have at some point.
you mean using that area for other community events?
Yeah, like
When school's not in session, like.
It might even be better
Yeah, it's closer, more walkable.
and more space.
And more space. Yeah, and that's a good point. I do need to, they've got to they have to relook at their parking, because if the MET's staying, right, that was proposed to go away.
Yeah.
Now it's staying, so their site plan that had it going away needs to be modified. And so I've got to really look at how parking works with not only the new school, but the MET staying, and what kind of increase in parking they need to put in there. But no, it's a good point. I think, it's,
I like the idea of sort of keeping options open, see what comes our way. I hear what Steve's saying too, in terms of giving the developer
chance for success.
guidance as to where we are. And when we talk about the farmer's market, what comes to mind for me is we would designate some space, and it would be for things like the farmer's market and whatnot, or a terminus, if not a terminus, to the Riverwalk, but a place where people from Hope or Lincolnville, Appleton, park a car, and walk into town one day using that Apollo site, part of that Apollo site. So I like the idea of keeping some of it around.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I'm not privy to what the town may have in mind, or if anything, as far as what the town needs physically for buildings, for something, town, whatever it is. So the property to me, its proximity and everything to the town, downtown, its position at the Riverwalk, I kind of like the idea of keeping some of it, control of it. That would allow things like the farmer's market, parking for the Riverwalk. But I also like the commercial aspect as well.
And to add on to that, I mean, and I've said it before, and maybe it's a dumb idea, but we continue to have these conversations project by project by project without ever having a vision for the community itself, so that we know what buildings do we want in the future? What do we want to happen with our schools? Do we want to fill them? Do we want more downtown development? What do we want as a community for the community as a whole? And then we have work groups on Sagamore that are whoever's interested in Sagamore, whoever's interested in the tannery. It's never based on a whole community vision. And been talking about that for years, and it never happens. And it's a long process, and this is already carts out of the barn. But I still really think that that's a conversation that as a community we need to have. Where do we want to be? Where do we want to be going in the future? I don't think that the comprehensive plan did that.
It didn't.
That was a zoning document. That wasn't a vision for the community.
Well, what do you think about the master plan, though? I thought that had some components of what the community as a whole envisioned for the future.
The downtown master plan, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but even that is within the context of your downtown. We're still never looking at the full community, acknowledging, we got a state park in our town, that's a huge amount of green space sitting there. We never look at the town as a whole. We look at it project by project. It's Main Street, it's Sagamore, it's Tannery, it's.
Yeah, interest by interest.
Interest by interest.
And there are a lot of different
So you bring in the
interests.
people who have whatever interest they have on that one thing, and then, they disband. There should be this vision that comes in that frames that conversation, in my mind. And we don't do it.
But I think that most of the time that people get involved in a project is because it involves them personally. It has something to do with them. And then when that's done, you're right, they move back
Fade away.
and they're done with
They've
it.
done their thing.
So you have to have a group that cares about the whole thing, and that's not as easy.
It takes a lot of work. It takes
Yeah.
a lot of work, and it takes a lot of time to do that. But I think it's really important. But
It is, and I think the best that I could do in this situation was take the working group's recommendations, what their plan was, and then the one prior, 10 years before, and say, here, developer, this is what has come out of this community's desire to do with this property, and take it and.
I know, as I said, the cart's out of the barn on a lot
Yeah,
of these,
yeah.
And it's the conversation we had around the middle school. What was that, was it going to get torn down? Was it going to stay up? Was it going to be housing? Was it going to be part of the school? We never had that conversation, it just never is framed in a townwide conversation, for whatever it's worth. It just frustrates me to see work group after work group and committee after committee coming in with their vision of the community. And I'm not saying those visions are wrong. They just are.
They're piecemeal.
It's a very focused vision based on something, and not everybody together.
Yep. Those are good thoughts right there.
One comment you made about
That's what it is.
space for a farmer's market, it is not used daily, even 8 hours a day. And it would be great if that space were also available for other kinds of events, given we know the farmer's market schedule and that's sacred and reserved, but the rest of the time, is that space available for something else that's important to our community that we might need? And then build.
To have that space,
Yeah,
to have it.
yep, and do other things there when it's not a farmer's market.
I think it's important we'll see, and I'll definitely tweak some of this language, Steve. I will do that, and I'll take everyone else's comments and thoughts too. I think it's important to you know, we're on the river there, right? So we have shoreland zoning. I know they're not as strict as in the village district, but we've got shoreland zoning lot coverages that we're up against. We have DEP setbacks that we're up against. We have the flood zone, which isn't, there's not a lot of that property in the flood zone, but we've got flood zoning, DEP permitting, and their setbacks generally 75 feet. So, and then we have our setbacks and our lot coverages in the shoreland zone. So when you say we've got 3 acres, well, 2.8, we just got to think about what that means and how much of that is actually going to be developed. And so if we decide, let's give a piece to, let's forever make a piece, an area that's going to be a park and then parking for the farmer's market or an area, all of a sudden, that really starts shrinking down the area that we actually can do anything with, you know, commercially or mixed use or whatever. So if we can encourage a developer to work with the farmer's market to provide parking for them, then I think that's a better avenue than trying to like kind of create a forever area that's going to be parking, you know, for farmer's market and for others. I think
Within those setbacks, that you could have lawn, and the lawn could be part of the space, which would be for those projects or events or things like the farmer's market. That is, the farmer's market could be in the setback. What I'm saying is that it's not going to all be given to no use because it falls within a setback.
fair. I mean, I get that. I just wanted to just, you know, for those that don't look at site plans every day and say, gosh, we got 3 acres, or almost 3 acres, there's a ton we can do here. I mean, parking spaces and travel lanes have dimensional requirements. The parking space is, you know, 9 by 18 generally. Travel lane's about 24 feet wide if it's 2-lane traffic. So all of a sudden, that area that people think I can put a parking lot in there, all of a sudden, if you want to put a code compliant, zoning ordinance compliant parking lot in it, you don't get much, you know, so.
And I would just observe too that parking lot, I think at one time, some people on the tenant work group thought, well, you wouldn't really need it if it was going to be mostly park, but the farmer's market, that lot is packed. It cannot be any
Along the
small,
street
and
as
along the
well.
street, both sides
Yeah.
sometimes, so
Yeah.
there's a parking resource, space that need to be reserved, but it sure will get multiple use, and the developer, whoever it is, if they can, you know, be upfront about sharing it or offer to share it, however that works, that's an asset can be.
It is.
widely used.
I mean, my fear is that that a developer, and who knows, but a developer may say, sure, they can use it. You know, they're going to pay for it.
Right.
You know, and right now the farmer's market isn't paying anything, and it's just this free thing that, you know, it's wonderful for the community again, but, you know, it's not being leased, it's, you know, they're just allowed to use it. And a developer may not be as, but there may be. I met with one, like I said, that loves the idea of being able to facilitate the farmer's market, loves the idea of a playground, and I hope they submit. And they may be very innovative, and we may find something we absolutely love, and I think that's the hope. And I think, again, that's why I included the tannery work groups and the old group's recommendations and said, hey, this is what we like. This is what the town has thought a lot about. Now let's try to get something to work. And then hopefully we've got enough time to build support in the community. You know, I mean, again, you're not going to make everyone happy. And, you know, some people want, I think, a park there, and that's it. I didn't see that in any of these recommendations. So, you know, you're never going to win over those folks.
Are you about to leave us?
I am.
You are. Okay.
If, I guess we would like you guys to take a look at all this and give feedback if you have it. And give me what's a good time? I mean, when can we?
I mean, within a week or so.
Okay.
You know, I
And
think
is this
we
something
shared
you can send out, email to the members?
I can do that.
And, you know, look it over and give Jeremy back some ideas on this if you have anything or suggestions. so we can put that in. Is your group meeting again, or where did you guys?
No, I think we're probably good. I think we were just really wanting to focus on what we thought the best way to kind of rate and rank some of these things are. And I've, since the select board, I think, wants to probably be the
And so once
final
you're,
arbiter on some of this stuff.
once you're comfortable with it, or we're through with it, then it goes to the select board, was my understanding from the meeting, and then they'll be the ones who approve it, and
Yeah.
then from there it'll go out. So but we want to give
Wasn't
them,
there a public hearing somewhere along the line in that process?
for the
For the
RFP.
RFP?
Not for this RFP, for redevelopment.
I thought there was.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. Steve?
Yeah, I don't think-
In what document said that?
I don't think we have to do a public meeting for just an RFP.
RFP, no.
No, we just have to okay it to send out.
After we get a proposal come in, we'd have to obviously hold, I mean, I think we're going to have hold a handful of meetings. I mean, that'll be an interesting piece altogether. You know, developers tend not to like, so it'll be interesting, but,
I'll go back to YouTube and check on
okay.
The public meeting that we talked about at the last select board meeting was ransom and talking about the process they're going through, right?
Right, there's a required public meeting.
But that is not the RFP. That
Correct.
is the property itself.
Correct.
And the cleanup procedure.
Correct.
Okay.
And just so you know, and just everyone knows, and Steve, so you know, I did get back EPA's comments on the community relations plan that was sent. They were, for the most part, really good with that plan. So at some point here, we'll be starting that process to at least get the community relations piece of the cleanup plan underway. I'd likely see there's a 30-day comment period. We have to tell them when we're going to start that, and we have to post that, do public notices, and then we'll have a public meeting somewhere in the middle of that 30-day comment period. Likely May would be my guess. Just throwing that out there. So yes, comments on this would be greatly appreciated.
Wait from today.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't want it to go too much farther. I'd like to get this to the select board ASAP and then get it out there. Because again,
Quick review, I think it looks good.
all right. Thank you. I will accentuate the farmer's market a little more, Steve. I didn't see it. They didn't focus on it enough, I don't think so. I also think the farmer's market can find a much better place in town that actually benefits the community, wider community too. So that's just me personally. It just seems like we could handle parking a lot better and provide more opportunities.
Up there from downtown.
Well, I will say that when I talked to Jess, one of the members from the farmer's market, and told her that they were going to have the opportunity to go back there, she said, great, that's a great thing for us, because that's going to enable them and her to kind of assess their customers a little more on where their customers are coming from, where their customers may like to see them go to an alternative site, because next year there'll have to be an alternative site, and at least they'll be able to do a little community outreach with their customers. As opposed to this year, there wasn't really that opportunity.
There are a lot of walkable customers there, I think, up at the parking lot. I don't.
Yeah,
There's not.
there was. I think she's saying there was more than there is now.
You could walk from the
When it was
parking
here,
lot.
there was. Out there, you think it's not.
So I have no idea.
It just depends. It depends.
that. It's pretty fair number of people walking up and down.
Yeah, I honestly haven't been there since I moved up there, but.
Yeah. I mean, people like on Cross Street may be more apt to walk to the old mill site parking to get their carrots and beets and everything else, but they're less apt to walk to the tannery site. But people that live on Gould Street
Right.
are more apt to walk to there than they were to the mill site,
I was
so,
curious if there was a feel for,
yeah.
if that was up, down, or the same.
I'm kind of surprised that they weren't enthusiastic about any of the spots that were offered to them as
Me too.
options. I mean, just for the summer
Me
or
too.
next summer. Because I mean, I see the visibility of the public landing or Atlantic
Or Atlantic
Avenue
Avenue
is
is huge.
phenomenal.
I think
I
it
know.
would have more impact on our downtown merchants if they had one of those two places that people would
A
come.
benefit to the downtown merchants,
It would
absolutely.
be a positive impact.
Commercial Street would be a mess, trying to go up and down the public landing. People driving and walking.
I have a question.
Anyway.
Were they talked, I heard there was some talk about the Common and across from Camden, because we do the car stuff there. And did that ever be brought up?
This, right?
Are you talking about
Post
the
office.
park or on the
green.
street?
Green?
The green, yeah, the village green.
Oh, I think that would be a tough one. I think that, we have not really talked about that one, but I think they need their vehicles, and then I do think that there were some restrictions on
Can't
commercial
have
activity.
commercial Ventures.
Curious about that, because if they went along that street,
Oh,
that might,
yeah.
because that might
Block the
alleviate,
street.
block the street like they do,
Chestnut, like
there's
you
a
do
car
for the
show
car
that they
show.
have there. and-
Oh, there's a good idea.
Do you think?
That would be
I'm not sure. Maybe there's too much commercial stuff.
post office on Saturday mornings.
It's true. on
Maybe
Saturday
it's not big
mornings.
enough.
I can't remember what,
Significant concerns of theirs are parking, and they really don't like to be on concrete.
And they told me that what they don't like their customers to have to carry their produce, really, very far. That's what their big one, when we said the landing or Atlantic Avenue, they said, well, they're going to be walking forever carrying their carrots or whatever, I mean, it was just going to be too much, and I thought,
Trying to cut down pumpkin sales.
Are carrots heavier than they used to be?
I just see, man, I see Atlantic Avenue and the landing, I really see Atlantic Avenue as kind of a really cool spot that could be just a really thriving event on Saturdays and on Wednesdays, but, I mean, we'll leave it up to
The one problem we may
them.
have there, because the library board of directors has control over a lot of that area, and they rent out the
Oh, the amphitheater, yeah.
Yeah, we
And
talked,
that's-
I did talk with them, with the library folks, and they were pretty keen on the idea.
Oh, they were? Okay.
They thought they would be able to.
Actually, the farmer's
work
market
it.
is over at 12.
Right.
And most weddings
mean,
or events wouldn't happen until
I think,
after that anyway.
I mean, right now, I think it's, they're there this summer, and, we've got to move forward.
But I think it's good what you said. They have a chance to ask people. And they could actually do a little survey. Where would you like to see us next summer?
Yeah.
And give the customers get some information from the customers. I like that.
I mean, and you may find like the snowball is a neat idea too. I mean, they could actually probably double the size of the market and right now they're pretty limited on who they let in and what they allow in. They could increase that, kind of split the whole, those that are farmers and those that are more of the craft makers.
they were for years up at Tibbetts.
Up at Tibbetts?
That was, I sort of forget that.
Yeah,
It was
that's
so
true.
Unvisible and inaccessible.
And not very attractive. Sorry.
It was a commercial.
But we'll work on it. So thank you for that. And I think this is a good discussion. And Steve, thanks for your comments. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. I do. And I guess I touched under the land thing, and I'm sorry if it sounded like I was venting a little bit about that. I don't know if it sounded that way. Did not intend for it to be that way, but, and I think, and I'll just follow in with those numbers again, and because it is such a tough one, a lot of towns have land that's available, and they try to do things with, whether it's turn into green space or, conservation areas or develop land development or for housing or for resident or for commercial use. We don't have much of that in town. And I understand there may be some vacant spaces around. There's really not much vacant land that's commercially zoned. I did an assessment. There's really nothing left. Speaking of Tibbetts, they're looking at coming in to do a small subdivision over on that lot. In, I think, 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now.
I don't know that name. Where is it?
Tibbetts.
Cord Ave.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Do we have an assessment of property, to Steve's point, what we're talking about is town-owned land, do we have an assessment kind of large subdividable, privately owned properties? Just, I mean, what, eyeball it and sort of look at identifying where big places are.
I mean, yeah, I can work with the assessing and work with our software and our mapping stuff, we can kind of assess, but again, all of it's so private. We don't have it, I mean, I don't have something I can turn on right this second, but in a matter of a couple of days, we can do something. There was a subdivision,
Just curious.
well, this made me start, when I started looking at this, there's a subdivision up on, up off of Cobb Road, that was approved a number of years ago. It's about 17 acres, not far from sewer and water. And I don't remember, I just haven't been here long enough to remember exactly where it is, but
Is that Ferriello between Thomas Street and Cobb Road?
I believe so. 17 acres there that went through subdivision approval and everything. Not developed, and the gentleman just rolled it in, he recently rolled it into his property now. So it does show up on some of our maps as subdivided lots, but now it's all backland, right, or rear land, so it's not assessed as subdivision lots, unfortunately. But that's one that I found just going through, looking at what we have, what's available in town, and I looked at old subdivisions, and that was one, and I was actually going to reach out to them and just ask the question. And I get Steve's point about housing, and it is a financial drain, and it can be, for sure. At the same time, there are families and people that are not moving here because they can't afford to move here, and there's no housing for them that would love to be a part of this community. And, we need to, people come here for what this community is, and we need to do what we can to at least try to keep housing prices stable or moderately priced so that people can come here and live here and move here. I'd love to move here. I can't afford to move here.
I think there's another component to that, too. One of the big problems that I hear about is our dark streets, because there are a lot of people that buy houses and then are never here. And attracting people that are here year-round that are taking advantage of the schools and the money that they make and would stay in the community is very important. So in terms of sending them to schools, we might lose money, but the money that stays in the community is substantial. Somebody just had
That's a proven point. Peter Francis is a demographer down, did you know Peter Francis in Exeter, New Hampshire? Because New Hampshire went through a wild phase where everybody wanted to put in senior housing. Everything was senior housing, everything they did, because they didn't want those kids in the school upping their taxes. And they came in and they started doing studies, and you're right, the people who are there year-round are who are spending the money in the community. So the net effect is way more positive for the community. And he came out in an article in one of the papers, in statewide newspapers and that, and was getting death threats from people saying he was anti-seniors.
Well, the other thing that's real important is being a year-round community.
Absolutely.
Because if we, keeping enough people here to make sure that our businesses and our restaurants and it's a year-round community is essential to keeping the town active and vibrant.
Well, our community structure too, like, all the committees and the churches and, all the organizations that make this a place that's valuable to live in. I mean, a few of us, sometimes it feels like we're carrying along, and we're ready for when the boom comes in the summer, and they say, oh, this is a great community, and then we're left kind of carrying along again. But the other thing I was going to add is water and sewer. I mean, if we're talking about densities, and you just can't open up subdivisions and expect that you're going to be able to create housing that's affordable. You have to extend water and sewer on a deliberate way in deliberate locations.
Like
I mean,
Absolutely no way to control the cost, or the eventual cost of this housing in the resale market unless you control it. You have to have an organization that says, you want to move out of this house, you got to sell it back to us.
I mean, there are models. North Haven Sustainable Housing is doing some work on that, and the Island Housing Trust on MDI are doing some work, and I think we do need to sit down and start a group to try to look at the housing piece. Because you're right. I mean, no matter what we do, we develop some housing, that's great. Turn around, and all of a sudden the market takes over, and we're back to where we were.
One thing I need to mention, there's an energy group meeting here at 5:30, so.
All right, perfect.
You
Can
tell us
this
that
out?
every month.
Staying over.
Thank you for doing that.
Stay over, so.
And you guys have a break in between?
Have we covered it?
I think we covered good today.
Obviously, this is a standing committee meeting on this day of the month, but, that being said, our next one is, I guess, on April 22nd at 4, so if you'd make sure that's on your calendar, and we'll send reminders, but
That's one of those Aprils.
Five
That's
Tuesday
one of
months.
the.
Thanks.
it's a 5 Tuesday month, yeah, as a matter of fact, so the 4th Tuesday is the 22nd. Or 4th Monday,
Don't confuse me.
or 5 Tuesdays, too.
Mondays, that's right.
Yeah.
And I guess just parting shots, Jeremy's going to send you an electronic copy of this in
Yeah.
some form or fashion,
Yeah.
and take a look at it and get back to him, or reply all, however you want to do it. But if you would, within the next week.
That would be great. Within the week would be wonderful. And again, just ending with the properties. Again, there's about 28 acres left that we have that outside of taking Sagamore out and Tannery out, 77 and almost 3 acres. That gives us 28 acres that the town owns. And there's like a 16-acre piece or a 12-acre piece over on Wiley Street. That's pretty, or is it Willie Street? Is for the most part pretty wet. There is there's some high land that I think is probably doable for maybe a couple house lots. There does appear to be a house, like we have a developable, I think, house lot over on Rawson Avenue that the town owns that we just have been sitting on. So I am going to look at these kinds of properties.
Can we look at them as a radius too from the downtown? Half mile, 2 miles, look at, walkability of those properties. If we're really having a conversation about housing, I think that's an important piece as well.
I think so too. I will say, like, the one on Rawson is like minimum lot size, barely meets our minimum lot size requirements. So from like lots like that one, I'm just probably going to propose to the select board we try to sell that lot. And not, it's sitting right in the middle of, house here and a house here, and just forested land
I've
between.
thought about that for years, and before you sell it, talk with the school department, because it backs up to their land on Knowlton Street. So if you had like a footbridge across to get kids to walk further, maybe that's.
Maybe they want to buy it from us.
Well.
That contingency fund?
I hear you.
It abuts school property with the river
does.
between, so.
It does.
And they always have circulation problems with Rawson Avenue.
Yeah.
Montgomery Street. I don't know what's going to happen with Knowlton Street, whether it's 2 ways again, but. that would-
Yeah.
maybe so. Anyway.
No, I get that.
Won't be too
I don't know.
All right.
It's interesting.
Thank you much.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yes, we can turn them off, and I'm going to go turn off the.
Jeremy? Just want to say, I once saw,
Really think.
I think it was in Arizona,
Thank you.